Welcome back to episode 50 of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have a really special guest who we've pretty much talked a whole nother podcast before coming on and spent about an hour chit-chatting. The legendary Coach Vass. Coach, how you doing?
Hey now, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you coming on, Coach, just to kind of, I don't know, BS for God knows however this ends long as it ends up being, but
3 hours.
I don't even know really how to start this. Actually, I'll make this. I know how to start this, and this is slightly sarcastic, but at the same time slightly serious. Why do you know so much football?
Wait, what?
Yeah. See, I knew that threw you off a little bit, but like, and what I mean by that is, and we talked a little bit about Twitter and what we see and what we don't see before we came on, and. I remember, what was it, like a week or two ago, you said like you commented on something like, this is actually this and this, or this is so and so. What have you done to learn and get to the point where you are studying wise?
So, the Catholic Church forces priests to not marry or have families so they can devote their life to God. For that reason, I stayed single without kids for a while. No, I am. I was when I was coming up, I knew this is what I wanted to do, and it was a combination of being in a new area. So I was a student at Miami, was a student at the University of Miami, the U, and I moved to San Jose to become a graduate assistant at San Jose State. And I didn't know anybody. I never visited. And I used that time to basically lock down, and I dedicated my whole life to coaching. Every day I was trying to learn, pick up as much as I could, make as many friendships and relationships as possible. And because of my background, because of my story, I didn't have somebody feeding me information. I didn't have a mentor until I was in the profession.
Yeah.
Here's something a lot of people don't know about me. I didn't play high school football.
Okay.
So I played when I was young. I played Pop Warner level, but I lived really far away. I went to private school, and my grandmother saved up enough money for me to go, because the schools where I lived were just awful at the time, just awful. And so I lived super far away, and nobody on my side of town lived in the side, and I wasn't old enough to drive. And my mom and grandfather were like, we can't, because I had to, freshman was later in the day, and they were just like, I can't come pick you up at 8:00 every night. It was just out of the question. And so I'd always loved the game, and I'd loved working with young people, but because of this angle, and I wanted to play for a while, but then I couldn't really play until my senior year, and I had done something in my back, or I don't know. It's hard to just go out and play your senior year of football, when you've not done it for a while. And so I did other sports. I was a musician, and that's what I thought I was going to do. But I always loved the game, and went to Miami, was just a student, and then begged my way basically onto the staff. And because I was kind of the underdog, or I was coming from this weird background, people are like, oh, what position did you play in high school? I'm like, drums. I played drums. Is that the position? I was a 3-4 nose tackle when I was the hardest position on defense to play when I was in Pop Warner.
Yeah.
And my ass kicked. No, but in all seriousness, and I know a lot of people, when they hear that, they're like, what the hell? And so I just was like, if I'm going to do this and chase this dream, I have to be that much better. Mm-hmm. I have to know that much more. And it was just an obsession. And I've always loved the X's and O's and studying. And I just studied as much possible crap as I could. And with my current job, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point what I'm doing, but I realized there's a lot of reasons why people coach.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing about football is learning.
Okay.
It's not calling the defense. It's not even building a defense. And don't get me wrong, I loved my relations with the players, but I love to learn. That's the most fun than I had. It's not stressful. You're not worried about stuff. Not that I'm like afraid. I mean, I was in the boiler room and coaching where I coached, and I coached in some really hard to coach places. I wasn't like running from a fight, so to speak, but I mean, I just love learning. I love talking to people, which is why I do have a podcast. Now I have 2 and a YouTube series and all this stuff. And it's just, I love to learn. And thankfully, I'm now in a position where I'm helping a lot of people. So they say. And so people want to give back.
Yeah.
And so people just randomly hit me up and say, hey, I heard you were talking about this. And they just start teaching me stuff. And I'm a dumbass, and I have an ADHD, like legit, and it's not a joke. And so I write everything down. And so I mean, I have libraries. I mean, there's a bookshelf. You can't see it. It's out of the camera shot, but it's literally 6-foot high bookshelf. It's all it is handwritten notes.
Okay.
It's stocked with like 40 binders on it. I just wrote everything down and tried to absorb as much as I could. And I mean, I appreciate you saying this. I don't feel like I know a lot, because I'm always asking questions. I'm always going places. Yeah. Like, I mean, I've spent a lot of my own money going to learn and study. And I think and my opening joke about the church, and I'm Catholic, by the way, so nobody get upset. But it's also kind of, I mean, you asked me, it's kind of funny or kind of joking, but kind of serious. But my same answer is like, I thought I was gonna be in San Jose and in the Bay Area for like 2 years. And it was when I moved, because I moved almost every year. Yeah. It was the best ever because everything was still packed. It took me like 5 years to be in Northern California to be like, I think maybe I'm staying more than a year than I thought I was going to. And I started I mean, there were boxes literally when I moved to Mississippi in 2011 that had never been unpacked from when I got there in 2006, because I was always in that mentality that I was going to leave. Okay. I was going to move on. I was going to move all over the country. And so I had a 1-track mind. I mean, I blew up the Match.com dating scene and eHarmony and insert every creepy website that you can imagine. Just kidding, kind of. But in all seriousness, like, I dedicated my life to that. And, you know, I laugh sometimes. Like, I've been to Alabama twice and Georgia twice, all these places. And someone's like, oh my God, you're so lucky. Like, I remember I was in Alabama and one of my posts like, oh my God, you're so lucky. I'm like, I guess, but like, I didn't do anything else but this for a long time. Yeah. And for better or for worse, you know, the guy was like, oh, my wife would never let me leave. Well, there you go. I mean, I went on like a 12-day skiing trip. Like, I was all over. It was in Fort Worth and TCU and UL with Ron Roberts and then Bama. And well, I didn't have that. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife. And part of that was I had like a 1-track mind because I thought I was going to coach in college. And then I got to college and I went, oh, no, not for me. Yeah. Not for me. And I got the hell out of there. And I was too much of a free spirit, I guess. And I've just had this 1-track mind. And so when all you do, so one day, and I appreciate the compliment, but one day somebody said something to me like, man, you're so good at this or something, which, you know, whatever. I don't know if I agree all the time, but fine. That's fine. I'll take it. But I laughed and said, well, I better be, because as much time as I've spent on this, if I was not at least halfway decent at it, I need to go find something else to do. It's just like, it's time. And I mean, I was coaching year round. So I went and I coached high school and then semi-pro. And literally there was one year where we played our last regular season game on a Friday night. Our first practice for semi-pro was on that Saturday morning. So the season actually overlapped. So there was 3 years where I coached literally year round. Now, it killed me. Yeah. And I ended up hating, there was a period where I hated football. There's a period where I didn't study for a couple years. I would study the TCU stuff and then I wouldn't touch it till like April, because I was so burned out. Yeah. You know, but I found my love for it again. I think once I branched outside of the TCU system and I started getting hungry for that knowledge. But there's like a 3 or 4 year period where there was this vacuum where like, I don't know. There was nothing. I didn't really study much. Yeah. It was weird.
Now,
You know, I can tell you what Gary Patterson did in 2011 versus X team, but I didn't know the other basics of other stuff. It was just weird. Anyway, I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good. You're good. Now, has defense always been your first love? Because obviously you're known for your make defense great again, and I mean you've obviously started an offensive podcast here recently, and all that stuff will be in the bio for people to click on and to go to. But has defense always been a love, and why was it defense over offense, or heck, even special teams? I'll throw that out there. But why? Why defense?
Well, let me start with special teams. I think everybody knows why it's not my favorite. Nobody likes special. Anybody that says they like special teams is full of shit. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's always been defense. So I haven't told this story too many times just because it hasn't come up. But basically, how I start, I always loved the game, right? Mm-hmm. But I was a student at Miami. I was collecting memorabilia. And they had this 1991 Miami Hurricanes playbook on eBay. I didn't know you could get it online. I mean, this is 2004. And I remember buying it and being like, this is so cool. What the hell does this mean? Why are those circles have half shades and stuff? I didn't know any of that stuff. And so I bought this book, American Football Coaches, the defensive coaching football, defensive strategies, blue book. And I bought it and I was just trying to learn what the hell it said. And I started getting into it. And then I had a class at Miami called the Sport Industry in South Florida. It was an intersession. So basically there were 2-week January classes because we didn't go back till the day after Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
So there was a 2-week period where they would have like, you'd cram a semester's worth of stuff into 2 weeks. And then there was a spring break version, which was like one class, 8 hours a day. And they crammed all of it into 1 week. And one of those intercession classes, we did Sport Industry in South Florida. And one of the places we visited the Florida Panthers, the Miami Heat, the Dolphins. Did we go to the Dolphins? Yeah, we went to the Dolphins, went to the city of Miami, went to Homestead Raceway, the Miami Marathon, whatever. One of the places we went to Miami's athletic department. And I pulled the director of football office aside. I said, you know, I want to learn. I want to work in this business. How do I do it with no experience? And so he sat and he talked to me and he said, I'll call you back in a week. He didn't. So I called him every day for 6 weeks until he gave me a job. Seriously. And I don't advise that, but it worked for me. And I think it was the love, you know, trying to understand what that meant. And I love problem solving, and defense is all problem solving and contingency planning. Yeah. And that's more of my speed, is figuring something out. Where I think offensive, if you take it away, like if you strip everything away, is in all facets of my life, I've been like that. I don't know if you remember this. When I was a kid, they used to have a commercial called from BASF, and it was BASF. We don't make the products you buy. We make the products you buy better. Yes, I know. That was always me. I was in my band. I wasn't the guy who wrote the songs, but I was the guy who could take the germ of a song and make it a full-fledged thing. And I feel like defense, I could take an idea or I could take a structure. They're lined up like this, and I could be creative, but coming up with stuff from scratch was never my strong suit. Just never was. And I realized, this is me reflecting back on my life. I wasn't like 21 at Miami being like, whoa, I know this about my personality, and so I'm going to do no. But reflecting back on it, I think that's what it was. Okay. Plus, I think it was more of my attitude. Yeah. Like, I grew up like a punk rock grunge drummer. I think that fits more defense than offense. Like if I played smooth jazz guitar, then maybe I could play on offense, but no, I'm kidding. But I don't know. I've always gravitated to, I think there's a lot of it there. And, you know, when I was at the school, they stuck me with the defensive coaches at Miami and they taught me how to break down film. And I think it's just serendipity or whatever.
Now, you mentioned you got out of college coaching. Would you ever go back to college coaching?
No.
Even with the expansion of like director of like analytics and why is that?
No. I'm too much of a free spirit, man. Like I sound like a total hippie when I say that, but like Don't be wrong. I spend my life talking to college coaches. I love college football. I love college coaching. But one of the reasons why I think I've been decently successful in what I've done is I know my limitations. And people are going to laugh at this. Maybe not laugh, but think I'm stupid. But this is the truth, which is if I don't get 7 hours of sleep, I'm literally useless.
Oh, yeah.
And I grew up, I don't want to get too Dr. Phil here, but I grew up, I was an only child. My dad left when I was when I was in middle school. My mom was very absent. She was taking care of a family friend my senior year. I went like 9 days without seeing her. And so I raised myself to a large degree. And I just am used to being on my own. And I'm used to like it's not even doing what I want to do, but like, I remember, when I got into my first real serious relationship with college, I would be like, all right, I'm going to go here for dinner. And my girlfriend time would be like, don't you want to ask me? And I wasn't being selfish. It was, growing up, like there was nobody to consult. I was like, this survival mode almost like, all right, I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat here. I'm making quick decisions. There was no like, okay, what does everybody want to do? There was nobody else. I mean, it kind of sounds sad saying this out loud, but it's true. I moved around the country by myself, and I realized that I was too much of an individual, and I didn't like, and I know they say it's all about who you work for and whatever, but I didn't understand the frat boy mentality. I worked at a place where, and I love these people very much now, but I worked at a place where I was treated the worst because I was the new guy and the lowest guy in the totem pole, even though I had way more experience than all of them combined coordinating a defense.
Yeah.
And I was treated that way because I was the new guy. For no reason other than that.
Yeah.
And I think I assumed the position. I assumed that role. I became I was less effective than I normally was. It was almost like I took on that role that they made for me to be like the new whipping boy.
Okay.
And I didn't like that. And I would go to these practices and see how these coaches get talked to. There's some of these guys, and I know they get paid, there's a lot of punctuation in their checks. So you talk to me however you want. I know a lot of them think like that, but a grown man's not going to talk to me like that. And I know that sounds I don't know how that sounds, but I knew my limitations. I saw the profession, the rigidity of it, the, people that work for Nick Saban, 340 days out of the year is playing for you. And life's too short, man. You can make all the money in the world, but if you got no time to spend it, what does it matter?
Exactly.
And I saw a lot of these coaches, their kids hated them. I mean, there's some guys I know from the league that personally knew their children, hated them. And I knew my personality, and I knew that if I was going to make it in that world, I couldn't be a Tony Dungy that left office at 6 or 7 and came home and spent time with his family. I knew that the way my brain works, it was going to take longer to do shit. And I knew that I would literally have to give everything to that. And I just wasn't at that point. I know I sound like a complete wuss, but I'm just being 100% honest. I mean, I've got calls to go back. I've been offered every year a position, and the only positions I would go back for, well, not even now with my lifestyle and having this house, and it's out of the question. But even 2 years ago, the jobs that I would have actually left for, I would have never got them. Like a Division I DB job, you're not just gonna start as a Division I DB coach.
Yeah.
Not even Division I Power 5.
Yeah.
Because I was living in my favorite area in the country, Northern California, making pretty decent money in a tech startup, nonprofit tech startup with working in sports. Well, the startup was sports, but I did the tech side of it. I get to live in my favorite area in the entire country. Why am I going to move to I already did this. I left here to go, and I was in Jackson, Mississippi, which I know people like it, but when you go from Silicon Valley to Jackson, Mississippi,
I get you.
I'm sorry. When it's 75 and sunny every day for 10 months out of the year, so I can take a pay cut to get screamed at because there wasn't 4 ounces of meat on a post-game meal sandwich, which actually happened. Excuse me? And that was just I knew my limitations. I knew it wasn't what I was cut out for. I have I think I have the ability, I would have the ability to do it, but I would just feel like somebody would start screaming at me, like, piss off, dude. And I'd go play guitar or something. I don't know. Like, I sound like a complete hip, but that's the truth. I wasn't for me.
I get you. So
is this the worst interview you've ever done, by the way?
No, that's not even close. I've had some bad stuff.
Everybody's like, I thought this was about football. This guy's just shitting on the profession and telling me how dumb he is.
No. You see, you know your limitations. Like, it's good when you know your limitations because it allows you to self-evaluate. Like, that's like people say, like, when I talk about, like, because I teach business and I encourage kids to join the military if they're interested. And I say all the time, like, I wouldn't have done well in the military. That's not my mindset, and I don't have the physical and mental ability to do that stuff. That's fine. There are people who are good. Same thing with this stuff. Like, if you don't, like, and to your point, part of that is the culture issue at that level, especially at the bigger schools where you're just going to scream at a grown man and stuff. It's just like, I am a very big proponent of how you treat people. I have that conversation all the time. Is like, when I get pissed off at high school stuff, it's like there's a certain way to do things and there's a certain way not to do things, and I get annoyed really quickly when you just treat people like crap. Like, there's no need for it.
Well, and plus another thing is I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. And I drove out to Dick Bumpus's house. Dick Bumpus was the longtime co-DC with Gary Patterson at TCU. And Bump and I were sitting at his kitchen table, and I said, "Why'd you leave?" I said, "You got a lot left in the tank. I can tell." He goes, "Chris, I've been doing this since I left college." He said, "I was told as a young man that it's time to get out of this profession when you're sick and tired of doing the same thing over and over again." And I got tired of it. And I'm not one of those guys. Like, I remember, I was at Sarah. We had a 5-year run where we went from second place in our division to 40th in the country, and it was amazing. And we won, and nobody expected it, and blah 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 blah. And then at the end, I'm like, well, now what? Why gotta do this again?
Yeah.
I want to go do something else. Like, I achieved what I wanted to achieve, and I wanted to move on. And I get bored very easily. And I knew that. And that's always the thing that scared me about football is I went through these phases when I was younger. I wanted to be the next Dave Grohl. And then one morning I woke up and I didn't want to play drums anymore. Well, that's scary.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about self-evaluating. That's part of my self-evaluation. I knew that. And so I was like, if I'm not going to get bored with this, I got to keep it fresh. And being in the same school, doing the same thing, trying to get back to the same level, because it's not like we could do any better. We're going to win the same game. I'm like, let's push it. Like,
what's the next step? Yeah.
It's just extreme self-evaluation.
Well, I have some of the same problems. I get bored. Like, that's where I've been fortunate. I've been the utility coach has been able to, like, coach a different position everywhere because that's where they needed somebody. But I have the same problem when I do stuff too repetitively. Like, it drives me insane to the same degree. But you mentioned burnout earlier, how you didn't study anything for a couple of years. I'm curious because there's points where I kind of feel like, how do you finally deal with the burnout?
How did I deal with it, or how did I come back from it?
Kind of both.
Well, I dealt with it by just not doing it. Like, I would remove myself, and I think part of it was I was in an area, and I hope nobody listens to this from that area, but I've talked about this ad nauseum on my podcast and other stories on other podcasts. But, I was in an area where they wanted to turn football into the American Revolution, where everybody's going to line up across from each other, and we're going to fire at the same time. And whoever had the bigger bullets or the better aim won. And so I was in a league with 7 other teams, and we had I formation, wing T, not buck. It was belly and full power.
Okay.
We had wing T option, so like Air Force, but out of the wing T, you can imagine. It was very different. But the 2 guys that ran the offenses learned it from the same dude. One decided to do more option, one decided to do more pulling guards and stuff. But they literally learned from the same guy. Okay. They were both assistants for him. Okay. We had the double tight double wing. which evolved to the shotgun double wing, which is really the balanced single wing.
Yeah.
We had another school that was two back fly, because the fly sweep was kind of invented. The offense, not the play, was invented in that area. So there was a lot of those guys around. And then there were two teams that changed all the time. There were pistol 10 person. I mean, but they weren't. Out of those two teams, they beat us one time in coaching in that league out of 12 games.
Okay.
And so how do you study, who do you go study to defend the wing T? And then especially, I came up with a plan. Shameless plug, I just did a CoachTube video. People have gone eat shit for it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
A guy messaged me, said, hey, we played this team last year. They put a running clock on us, and we shut them out using this plan. Well, it was a really good plan. Why? Because this team never changed for 6 years. They're still, they ran the offense the same way for 20 years before. I still help Sarah. They're still running it exactly the same now. And I could literally help them game plan without even watching any of their film. I was like, I would just ask, I knew what questions to ask. And so who are you going to study to defend the wing T in college? Who are you going to study to defend the double wing? We used to pay Brandon Lechtenberg, my old boss at Millsaps, to come out every year. And we wouldn't even watch those teams. One time I was like, how would you defend this? He was like, I don't know. I've never seen this shit before. And what he drew up, I was like, no offense, Brandon, if you listen, I love you to death. But I was like, I'm never doing this. He didn't know. He'd never seen it before.
I get you.
And so, I mean, how many ways, and especially if you're kicking somebody's ass, what are you going to change for? If you know they're not going to change, why are you going to change? So that also facilitated that. And I just got involved in other stuff. I'm a huge, and you can believe this part if you want, but I'm a huge soccer fan.
Nothing wrong with
that. So
I
would get obsessed about soccer, or there was a time I had a rough patch in 2016 or 2017, early 2017, where I started playing video games with my family, my uncles. We would play bullshit like Fortnite or whatever. And I know you're like, are you serious? You're seriously talking about this? But when you're single and you're living in California and you're going through a tough time, it was something that me and my uncles could play. And it was like, we weren't going to call each other and talk on the phone for 3 hours, but you put me in a pink bear costume running around with a cartoon gun. We were thick as thieves, and we were literally stealing shit from people in the game. So it fit. But I mean, I explored different things, and I got back into music. And I just tried to do everything but football. And then how did I fall? Now, the other part of that question is, how did I get back involved? Was Gary, I was supposed to go to TCU. I got approved to go in 2018 to visit.
Yeah.
And Patterson, somebody was on the field and was filming shit, and they shouldn't have been. So he snaps and he cancels everybody's visits. Ooh. So I got nowhere to go. And the problem with TCU is they're unique, and they're the only ones that really do what they do throughout. Now, other people play quarters and shit, but the way that they construct their defense is so unique. Nobody else does anything like it, which is great, but it's a problem when they won't talk to you. It's just like Bump. Bumpus has this whole D-line play that I've never seen anybody else do. And it's fascinating, but my fear is sometimes it's hard to get a hold of him. And so if I have a problem that I'm not smart enough to fix, who do I turn to?
Yeah.
So I'm mad, and my buddy Chris King from John Bosco was like, hey, we're going to go to Georgia. You should come with us. And I wanted to come visit my mom, come home, take a little bit of a break. So I was like, I think I know one of the GAs there. It was my buddy Glenn Schumann, who I met when he was 18 in Alabama. And it turns out he's the inside linebackers coach, now co-DC.
Yeah.
So I talked to Glenn. We were Facebook buddies, and I was like, hey, man, I doubt you remember me, but I'm going to come visit. Can we hang out? He said, sure. And then so I started studying the Saban stuff, and it was going back to the learning. I decided to learn a new system. And I knew a bunch of it. I mean, I tell everybody who listen now, that Dolphin Saban playbook that's out there, I scanned that myself. I'm the reason that's online. That's right. That's right. Everybody, this guy right here. But, I was the first person to put Ripley's match material on the internet. That's my badge of honor.
There you go.
And So I had experience with it, but I never went and learned it. And I said, you know what? I kind of knew I was going to switch schools and we were going to enter the 21st century in terms of offensive football, having to defend offensive football. I said, well, if I'm going to learn a new system, might as well learn the best out there. And a lot of people run this. So if I run into problems, I have a lot of people to call. And so I decided to learn, and that kind of made me fall in love with the game again. And then my learning curve has now it's on steroids now because of what I'm doing. Like I learned the Aranda stuff. I mean, the hardest part for me is keeping the languages straight from one defense, one system to another. Yeah. But that's part of my businesses now is people are like, okay, I want to learn this Dave Aranda defense, but I don't want to spend 6 months studying it, So they come, they hire me, and I teach them all the stuff they need to do in a short amount of time, and they think it's great because they're not wasting time. Time is money, so they're willing to pay money for save time. And that's part of what I do. Like I learn all different systems and help people with whatever they need help with. And that's been one of the harder things for me now is studying stuff that I'm not necessarily interested in, but I know that other people will be. Yeah. And so I need to be versed up. That's been one of the harder things for me is but luckily I have such a thirst for learning that even though it's stuff it's like the desire to learn supersedes I don't want to run the 30 stack. Are you kidding me? No offense to any stack guys, but I hated the 30 stack. I never wanted to learn the 30 stack because I was afraid I was going to like it. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And then now I started researching because what happens when the 30 stack client comes along?
Yeah.
You kind of kill your client base when you don't know anything about something. So, I had to but what's funny and that shows the power of learning is special teams as I was outside of that. I'm still not learning special teams, but, my desire to learn superseded my desire to learn something specific that I didn't want to learn. And I'm fascinated by it. The defense I was the most obsessed with this offseason, one out of Cincinnati. There are 3-4 cover one. It's bizarre, but they're 3-4 cover one, spill and overlap versus 11. And then when you get into 10, they're 30 stack lever, spill lever. 30 stack lever, spill lever, cover one versus 10 personnel is the last place I thought it would be, but I love their defense. And it works. Because I'm not married to a system. I'm married to winning. So I don't give a shit how you do it. I'm going to do it, Exactly. And I don't know. So that was the cure for the
burnout.
Burnout. Yeah. Get away from it and then find something that inspires you.
Now, I don't really care if people skip this part of the podcast because I just don't care. But as a business and sports teacher, class I designed myself, you mentioned soccer there, so I'm going to ask one soccer question. This is probably the only time soccer will ever be brought up on this podcast and whatever. Since you are a soccer fan, what were your thoughts on the new Super League that is slowly crumbling already?
I was super excited about it until I realized that there was no promotion relegation, and I went, this will never work. Okay. I know for Americans, we have a hard time understanding because and they have a good point. And this is why I always give people shit that are American sports fans. Oh, soccer's a communist sport. And I'm like, really? Well, and there's no draft. You want to know what communism is? Is being told you've been picked by this team and this is how much money you're going to make because somebody else decided for you. Over there, you want somebody, they ain't no draft picks. You say, I'm buying your ass. Yeah. And I'm going to pay you. And if you suck, you don't get rewarded. I mean, you want to talk about people, all right, can I go on a little bit?
Go, you're right.
These idiots that are on Twitter, participation trophies are the reason that teams are terrible people. Kids are terrible people. And then they turn around and be like, yes, my team got last place. We get the first pick in the draft. Like, what the hell is that? That's a participation trophy. You mean to tell me for being the shittiest team in the league, you get to have the first pick? Over there, you're the shittiest team, you're out. Get out of the league. Yeah. That's American as it gets right there. And so for those of you who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, in England, there's no tanking it, because if you tank it, you go down and your salary gets cut. You're out. So usually the bottom 3 teams in the league go down. The top 3 teams in the league go up. Most in the Premier League, the top 2 teams go up automatically. And then the third team, 3, 4, 5, and 6 have a 1-game playoff, or a round robin playoff to see who gets that third spot. And that's what makes it exciting at the end of the year for even a shitty team that has no chance of winning.
Yeah.
And what this league has done is saying we're getting rid of that. And also, like, why are Spurs in there? Leicester won the title 5 years ago. Spurs haven't won the title in 60 years?
Yeah.
Aston Villa has how many European Cups? Why aren't they in? You want to talk about, like, tradition? Why is Ajax not in? Ajax has 4 European Cups. But Spurs are in the league? Well, we know why. It's because of money.
Yeah.
But I wasn't paying attention. I heard that United's Ed Woodward got fired, which I'm for that. But all these people got fired, but I don't understand it, because all these presidents, like United's chairman was on the board. Why did Woodward get fired? I don't know. I haven't been able to read it today, but as soon as we're off this, I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I skimmed the article earlier, and there was what was publicly said was obviously some of it was not the true full story, and here's some public PR stuff to make this sound a little bit better. But yeah, like I said, I just wanted to get your hot take on that, because I don't think I've heard anybody that's a true soccer fan say anything positive about the merger. They're like, oh, have hope, and then they read into it and they're like, ooh, yeah. So okay.
I mean, I the thing that I didn't understand was everybody's like they're leaving. They're not leaving. They're just creating a new Champions League.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand. Like, all the clubs at the top are making all the money, and they're having to share it. That's another thing. Revenue sharing. They're like, screw your revenue sharing. That's American right there.
Yeah.
Oh, you're poor? Get the hell out. There's nothing more American than that.
That or sell your team and somebody else with money come in and pay for stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's so funny is all these people, these football coaches, are like, oh, I love an American sport, like American football. I'm like, what's more communist than having a play where 11 people have to do the right thing, and if one person fails, we all fail? Soccer, one guy can pick up the ball and run down the field and score, and nobody can do anything else about it. Look at Messi. He just gets the ball and runs down the field. Nobody's helping him. That's American. Anyway,
I'd love it.
Now that I pissed off everybody, we can continue with the football part.
Fine. Now, I want to.
At least I didn't give you. Oh, you mean the real football?
Yeah. Please don't do that.
Give me one of those.
Oh God, like I love getting into arguing with students about that. Like, stop. But I we've hit on a couple points here. But I mean, I want to go back to the Cincinnati thing for a minute, because you said you kind of fell in love with that and what they were doing. But you have to look at a lot of defenses. You mentioned Rhonda. You started with the Gary Patterson stuff, the Saban stuff. Is there any curiosity from you skimming or researching? Is there anybody that like stands out outside of that like core group that is doing some good stuff, or starting I should probably keep an eye on him or what they're doing, because they seem to head in the right direction?
I think Cincinnati. I would say Cincinnati is the top one off the beaten path.
Okay.
That's outside of Saban.
All right.
I mean, the defense, Nate Woody is one. Not my favorite style of defense, but if I was at a school and I had a certain thing, it's funny. So last year I was talking to Austin Armstrong, who's the new DC at Southern Miss, who I met. He was a QC at Georgia. And what's interesting about Austin was he's the only guy I've ever met that's worked in the Patterson, the Saban, and the Aranda system. And he's young. He's like 26 at the time. I don't know how old he is now because of his birthday, et cetera. But
yeah.
So Austin coached at West Georgia. Well, West Georgia ran the TCU stuff. Well, who taught them the TCU stuff? Brandon Lechtenberg. Small world. My old boss, the guy who taught me the TCU defense. He goes and works at UL, works for Ron Roberts, him and Aranda run a lot of the same stuff. Then he gets a job at Georgia. He learns the Kirby Smart, Nick Saban defense, goes back to UL as a position coach, and then gets the DC job at Southern Miss. So I was talking to him. We were talking about different families. And he says there's really 3 families of defense out there right now, the big ones. He said the Nick Saban tree, the Dave Aranda tree, and the Nate Woody East Coast 3-4 tree. I'm like, the who? I had no idea. And I'm from the East Coast. But Nate was at Wofford for a while. And it's one of those things, what's the term? You know, when somebody tells you something for the first time and you never notice it, and then that's all you can see, that's all you notice.
Oh yeah, what is that called?
Like you'll see like a new car, like you'll see a commercial for a car, and you'll be like, oh, I've never seen that car before, and then all of a sudden that's all you see because
like
it's on the front of your brain.
Yeah,
there's got to be some. I'm sure the Germans have words for it, but and that's what it was. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, I run the Nate Woody system, and I run the Nate Woody system. Hoover High School, Chad McGee, a good friend of mine, he runs Nate Woody's defense to a T. And all of a sudden, all these people, I'm like, well, I got to have this Nate Woody guy on. So I got a hold of Nate, had him on, then had Courtney Braswell on, who worked for him in App State, who's now joined him in Army. And it's not my cup of tea in terms of like what I personally prefer. But it was fun to study. And basically, it's a three down on front, not tight. They can be tight, but it's 404.
Yeah.
It's 3-4 with nickel. It's so imagine a 3 down, 2 backers, and then your boundary side guy is like a hybrid by necessity. You know, it's like Wisconsin. I don't want to go too far off the beaten path, but like Wisconsin, they're able to play base versus 11 personnel. Why? Because their guys are more hybrid guys, because they don't get the Arden Keys or whatever from LSU. They have like more hybrid 220, 230 guys that are in that range. So they take a minus and turn it into a plus. And now because their guys are able to play, they're smaller, quicker, they're not as big and as hulking, they're able to take that and play more base and then do more stuff out of one package. But anyway, going back to Nate, so you imagine your typical 3-4 outside backer is your boundary overhang. And then your field overhang is like a TCU strong safety. Not a nickel, not like a corner, but like another safety.
Yeah.
And it's your standard fare, boundary rush, split safety coverage, field rush, cover 3. Simple. You can get complex with it, but it's built-in simplicity, and it's fantastic. And I enjoyed studying it. Again, there were some pressures he did that I liked, but I went to Miami, man. We're at 4-2. What's funny is you think I'd be a 4-3 guy. I'm a 4-2 guy, but get up the field, disrupt, obviously bend traps and veer blocks, but that was the style I came from, which is why I think I gravitated towards this TCU stuff. It was so natural. So odd fronts and slanting on fronts was not what I grew up around. Now, again, my new job as a consultant, as a content creator, it's all well and good to love the TCU system, but somebody comes to me like, I'm an odd front guy with undersized kids. We line up and get our ass kicked. Got anything for me? I'm like, Nate Woody, And so that was fun for me to study. So that's one that's great. Roberts, even though he's close to Aranda, I think Ron Roberts might be one of the best coaches in the country. And then vis-a-vis Ron would be Patrick Toney, who was his understudy at UL, who now took over for him when he went to Baylor.
Yeah,
that's still in the Aranda tree. They're different. Like Patrick's his own man, and I hate lumping guys together, but
y'all have your influences. Everybody's got their own influence on why they run stuff and where they get it from.
I mean, it's very... And then I will say this, and I know this isn't exactly what you asked for, but I think it's off the beaten path for high school and college guys, Vic Fangio. So I'm doing a big Vic Fangio study, and I know you're like, off the beaten path, you're going to name an NFL guy. But I wouldn't necessarily think to go to him for scheme advice. Like, oh, go study Vic Fangio and Brandon Staley. And I don't want to get it unless you want to. I don't want to get into this whole long, big thing. But what's interesting to me about Vic is they play the bear fronts at a 2 high, which is very hard to do for a lot of people. I'm not talking about on 3rd down. I'm talking about on 1st and 10. And what they do that's interesting is in most odd structures, like I mentioned about Nate, boundary side rush, you're going to play 2 high. Field side rush, you're going to play 1 high because you want to rotate and all this. But because they're playing with a Sam and a nickel when they're in their bear stuff. It's not like Mint where you've got like 9, 4 eye, 0, 4 eye, and then your field overhang is your nickel.
Yeah.
They're playing 5, 3, 0, 3, 5, 1 backer, and so they're bringing the Sam. They can still cover down to the field, and so they're bringing strong side with quarters, which is not, you don't see that very often. Most of the time, again, field side's 3 deep or 1 high, because if you bring the nickel, right, you have to cover down, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just bring the nickel and not do, unless you're playing trap coverage. What do you? Just throw it to the slot, but they're bringing field side pressure and sitting on the nickel and dropping the boundary side end, who's really an outside backer. And I think on a macro level, if you're a defensive coordinator, and once you can get to the creativity of not always having to have an edge rusher be the edge rusher, and that you're comfortable with a 3 copping or, working to contain on pass, whatever you call it, it opens up a lot of creativity. But I love what Fangio does. He does a lot of read cover 3 stuff where the weak safety and the boundary backer are reading the release of the back, or they're predetermining it based on who that is.
Yeah.
If it's Christian McCaffrey, then they're going to play regular cover 3, weak cover 6, whatever you want to call it, where the weak safety is going to come down and play him. But if it's Derrick Henry and he's in there to pass block, they'll put the backer on him, and then the safety will poach 3 like it's quarters.
Yeah.
Or they'll read it. So if it's Derrick Henry, but he flares a lot, if he blocks, the backer will man him up, and the safety will rob 3 to take he's your weak hook bender player. And then if he flares, then it goes back to normal. The safety comes down, the weak hook defender will now be the linebacker. He'll take the bender.
Okay.
Which is very unique. Bama does it. They call it 6 sight. Saban doesn't like it, but Pruitt did. But they got it from the Bears. And so there's a lot of little stuff that he does that's really good.
Okay.
I like how they double the receivers. We've actually done it, just was named differently, where they'll play halves to wherever the star receiver is. So they call it ring, I believe. Ring. I'm going to do a whole YouTube series on it, but I can't remember the name, but they have like ring or fist, or it's all like hand-based stuff. There's hand, there's ring, there's fist, there's pounder. And I can't remember which one's what, but I think they call like ring, when they play the Packers, ring 17 means we're going to play halves to Devontae Adams will play quarters away.
Okay.
Because they're also, one thing that's interesting about Fangio is they play a lot of half quarter, which is very rare. Most people play quarter half.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that is because when Fangio was with the Bears and then Staley with the Rams, they had a shutdown corner. And then so they can stick Jalen Ramsey in the boundary, or they had Fuller at the Bears, or they had 2 good ones. They had Prince and Mukamura. And they can man him up to the boundary and play halves of the field, which is not something you see a lot. It's usually, or people will play palms. They're playing country-ass halves coverage to the field, quarters of the boundary, which is, again, rare. So there's some stuff that you do that's pretty interesting. And then, of course, their 40 front stuff, which is basically the like if you ever have to play the Shanahan offense, if you see teams that are still doing that, like there was a team in Northern California that I don't know when they stopped with the OC, Chris Dahlman, great dude at Palma High School. He played in the league, coached at Stanford, and he worked for Alex Gibbs. Yeah. And so I would do this type of stuff. They don't do that anymore, but they have like the 6-1 quarters with the Patriots in the Super Bowl versus the Rams. Fangio did that to the Rams first that year, kicked their ass. Yeah. That's how Staley got the job, because one of the reasons, because McVay remembered that. Yeah. That was the game. Remember, he named all the personnel.
Oh, yeah, he like that picture of memory, and then he could just name every single.
Everybody was like, oh my God. I'm like, you mean the team he just played? He just named the roster of the team he just played? Yeah. Wow. Crazy, right? Yeah. But that was that game. But they play some 6-1 stuff that's really interesting. So if you're looking for stuff off the beaten path, those are the things that interest me.
Okay. Now, I mean, I'm always curious, because I've not found a method that I like so far. Mine changes every time. Where do you start when you want to study something? Like, how? Obviously, get the film and all that stuff, but like, What does that process, at least the beginning of it, look like?
There isn't one. I call somebody on the staff there, or I get a hold of somebody, and I'm able to do that now.
Yeah.
I'm high maintenance. I tell this to people all the time. Like, I've gotten so many tags and playbooks and stuff that, like, I remember the Cincinnati stuff caught my eye, and I know Cody Alexander had studied it, so I called Cody. And there was somebody else, and I went, I'm trying to figure out, because they part of the Cincinnati thing, and again, taking not really negative, but taking a unique situation a positive. The reason that their stuff is crazy is, like I said, they play 3-4 cover 1 versus 11, 3-3 stack lever spill lever versus 10. But what makes them interesting is they have these giganto inside linebackers. If you watch them,
Yeah.
they just have these enormous, like, their linebackers are bigger than both ends, and they just run and plug the shit out of the A gaps and B gaps. But they did that because they had those kids. Like, and again, I would never, I don't think I would do that sort of defense. But if I was at a high school and all of a sudden I had a bunch of linemen and no backers, which every year, I basically would have a system in high school where I would come up with a language system so you could do whatever you want to do, which is why I love the TCU stuff and always talk about it. But then have a contingency plan. All right, have 6 linemen and 1 linebacker, play the Cincinnati stuff. Line those guys off the ball and just go detonate linemen. Now, I never had that. I had quicker D linemen, smaller guys. Well, then that's not, and then backer safety types. Well, then that's not the defense you would play. You'd play more of the TCU stuff. But if you ever get in that situation, that's what I would do. But my process is, and I'm as high maintenance as it comes, man. I've had tags and gone to places, and I am terrible at trying to figure stuff out if I don't know it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I may be underselling myself a bit or a lot, but like, because I know how when I first started doing this, I underestimated how many times people screw up. I thought it was like Madden, like everybody did their jobs no matter what. And, I'm a friend to a lot of journalists, and they hit me up like, hey, what is this coverage? And I'll be like, I don't know. Like, they panic. Well, if you don't know, then who's going to know? I'm like, these 2 guys, I think, busted. It's context clues trying to figure out. But so what I'll do is I'll watch and I'll tag some stuff. I usually put it in our language. And then as quickly as I can, so like this past with the Cincinnati thing, I put out a tweet in 15 minutes. Somebody sent me Freeman's number, the DC, who's now at Notre Dame. I reached out to him. He actually made the safeties coach at Cincinnati talk to me. He's like, hey, will you brief this cat? Because, he was in the middle of moving and stuff. Colin Hitchler. Here, I feel bad for Colin. Here's Colin. Marcus goes to Notre Dame. Colin's still at Cincinnati, and now he has his old boss calling him like, hey, talk to this guy. And so I ended up bringing Colin on the Patreon, and then he went through the whole thing. But I was like, yo, what are you doing here? And I had him teach it to me. Like, here's a tip if you follow me. If all of a sudden I start talking about a team or something I enjoy a lot, it is because I've either received a playbook in secret, I've received tags in secret, or I have some sort of personal connection to somebody on that staff that's taught me the stuff. There's so many, because offense is easy when you're studying because they set the tone. Yeah, you have read routes and stuff, but it's this or that, unless you're talking about the run and shoot where there's 8 different reactions off those routes. But defense, your stem response could be, based on a lot of things. Here's a great example. And this is to prove my point. There's a call, which I will redact for this podcast, that LSU made in 2019. Okay. Yeah. And it was a word that used to mean something completely different. That's Dave's problem, is he repurposes words. It's not a problem, but it's confusing when you're trying to learn. Okay. This word was a 1-word call, so there was no context clues. So I had the tags for the film. Okay. This call shows up 29 times. This call looks like undercover 1. I'm watching it. I'm like, guys, this is just undercover one. So there's 29 snaps. What the call was, and I'll explain what it does. So it was, and I was right. It was undercover one, but then I'm like, why isn't it just called, used to call it Eagle Ed one. Then they went to under. So in Dave's world, this is where it gets confusing. Even having tags or having a playbook or whatever, Dave, under to Dave used to mean lineup and odds slant to the tight end, slant to under.
Yeah.
Well, Eagle Ed was the under, lineup in the under. But now he's calling Eagle his tight adjustment where he shades the nose one way and pulls the 4-eye away into a 3. And now he's calling under the following year. So, and this is just from one year to another. It's not like he's leaving a place and be like, all right, we come up with new terms. He repurposes terms. So he has this one word call. He runs 29 times. And what the call is, it's genius. What the call is it tells the defense we're going to play undercover one. However, if we get YT protection, which for Dave is back in the tight end or lineup together, full slide away, back and tight end, insert to the same side, play action, 7-man protection. The safety that is covering the tight end is going to green dog off the edge and rush because they don't run tight end delay screens or whatever.
Yeah.
That's what this word means, right? Which used to mean something completely different. Here's the problem. Out of 29 calls, only 14 passes. So if they don't pass the ball, 16 of those snaps or 15 of those snaps, it's just undercover one.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I know it's not a mistake. Nothing shows up 29 times. So I knew there was a reason. But it wasn't like it was under one tag word. It was just word. No other context. Now, out of those 14 passes, only 7 of them were YT protection. So if it's regular 6-man where the guy's releasing or the tight end blocks and the back releases, it's undercover one. So now we've shrunk our 29 play sample size down to 7 plays where you're actually getting the YT protection. 3 out of the 7 clips, Delpit, the safety that's supposed to go, doesn't go. So I have 29 plays of a call. I have the tag. I have the words. I know what it is.
Yeah.
I know the word. But out of those 29 snaps, only 4 is really activating what he's supposed to do. How the hell am I going to figure that out?
Yeah.
I had to harass 2 guys that worked there until they're like, fine, I'll look it up. And then I laughed. When he told me, I just started laughing. They're like, why are you laughing? That's like a good concept. I'm like, I'm not saying it's not a good concept, but who the hell would have figured that out?
Yeah.
I mean, so if I'm not able to figure stuff out when I have the tags for something, how the hell am I going to figure something? And I know the defense. How the hell am I going to figure out something I don't know anything about? So that's my whole thing is I'm very selective in what I really want to get in the weeds because I know myself. And if I pick something, that's all I'll do. So the hardest thing is to say no and be like, you know what, I'm not going to study this. But if I'm going to go down that road, I go down that road. And I beg people for their time. I offer to pay them money. I offer, we talked about this during the pre-interview. Like I send wine from Napa, or kind of where a little bit north of where I used to live, as a gift. Like it used to be I would get film for coaches, but now they get all the film. But like I would use connections, and basically what I would do is I would say, okay, I'll get you this, but can I share the information with the guy that I'm getting the film from? So everybody won.
Yeah.
It was like the mob. Everybody got their back scratched. But, and so that's the process I go down, which I know is everybody's like, great, I'll start offering wine. It's like, that doesn't help me. But that's honestly like,
yeah.
Now I will say this for stuff that like, for example, I'm studying the Rams because of Fangio. Well, I already know the defense now. So it's easy for me to sit there and be like, oh, that's Petty Sam 8, or that's, cheat 9 key or whatever. Like, I know that already. Now there's some stuff that I don't know that he's done differently, but like Brandon Staley is half, I don't want to say half, but because I don't know the percentages, but part Saban, part Fangio. So the shit I don't know from Fangio, I know from Saban. So like when he played the Eagles last year, they played mid-4 man, and he called it mid-4 man. but I know somebody that was on their staff. He called, that's what Saban calls it, mint for mod. It's mint for mod share.
Okay.
So I'll only study things in my wheelhouse, or I'll watch Ron where I know about what he's doing because I know the Aranda stuff. Or, I mean, that's not really a fair comparison because I know Ron.
Yeah.
I also offer like weird services. I know it's going to sound creepy at first, but like, so for example, I mentioned my buddy Glenn Schumann at Georgia. I said, hey, Glenn, here's the deal. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast at the time. I know you have these late night recruiting trips. If you're driving and you're bored or you're getting tired and you need somebody to keep you company, call me. So I would reach out to coaches and be like, hey, when are you going on the road? Because they love it because it helps pass the time. So one night I'm literally taking the trash out. It's like 10:30 at night. And I get a phone call from Glenn Schumann from Georgia. And I'm like, Vasseur, I'm 30 minutes from the hotel. I'm dying. Keep me awake. I'm like, okay. And so I just started asking him a bunch of questions and helped him stay awake. You know, like, let me keep you company when you're driving for recruiting. Now, obviously, with COVID and stuff, that there's been no in-school visits and things. Yeah. But then coaches have been at home more, so it's 6 one way, half dozen the other. But like Ron Roberts, getting a hold of a guy like that during the week, during the spring season, very hard. So what I said was this. During COVID, when they weren't in the spring, so in the spring, but not during spring football, in conversation, he's like, oh, I go on a walk for like an hour and a half on Saturday. I was like, can I keep you company on your walk? And so he would go walking and he'd be like, I'm leaving in 20. Call me in 20. And then boom, I'd hit him up and he'd be walking and he wasn't going on a scenic walk. He was going to walk to like get exercise. So he's like, this is fantastic. This is going to make this go by so much faster. Yeah. So find a way, like you might be sitting at home and being a high school coach and be like, how am I going to provide value to Ron Roberts? Or how am I going to provide value to X coach? Help them not be bored. I don't know. Come up with something like that. Honestly, that's how I've built so many relationships off of just crazy stuff like that. And it's been so weird. I don't know. I don't know if any of this is helpful to anybody.
Oh, no, that's great. I'm half tempted to name this.
I mean, it's funny. If nothing else, it's funny to be like tracking people's walking habits. Like, that's how insane I am. I'm like, oh, you go to walk between 3 and 4 p.m. Central Time on Saturdays? And I would schedule. I remember I would like schedule my day around Ron Roberts' afternoon walks.
That's hilarious. That is true. That is truly hilarious.
No. Why not?
Yeah. Now, I mean, I want your opinion on a couple things. And I'm just going to throw it out there, and you can give me a long answer, a short answer. I don't think there's probably a short answer with you, so that's even better.
Take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment because that tells me your detail. 3 high safety defense.
That's a nice way of putting it. Most people say long-winded. 3 high safety defenses. Love it versus 10 personnel. Hate it versus anything else.
Okay.
My personal opinion. I get scared shitless of a 3-2 box versus 11 personnel. I don't, unless you have Roy Williams or whatever as your cleanup guy. The way I pick my secondary, my free safety is one of my better cover guys, which free safety to me is field side safety or whatever. I'd rather fit it up 4 down, 11 personnel or mint. It makes me afraid. Iowa State's done a fantastic job with it, but love it versus 10 personnel. But scares me versus anything else. Okay. Just personal preference.
Do you obviously it's the in vogue college answer to some things. Excluding the state of Texas, because that's a whole different, they have college hash marks and all that lovely stuff. Can that be a functional, should high schools even worry about it?
Worry about what?
3 high safety. Should they even I mean, Texas is a different animal, so, but from a high school standpoint, what do you think?
Should they even look at doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for an answer versus 10 personnel and you want to play, here's the thing. If you're a 1 high team, no, don't play it. I will say one of my favorite answers to 10 personnel spread. So it's funny, I was kissing Cincinnati's ass, but one of the best answers I'd seen to 10 personnel spread was Fresno State a couple years ago, which is very similar to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So you could start out, and this is how we married the two, is we would line up in 3 high, and our overhangs would come to 4x4.
Okay.
And then our deep 2 safeties would roll down and cover the overhangs, and then our middle safety would stay in the middle. And it was great because you had somebody extra on the quarterback and somebody on the throw to both sides.
Okay.
And you couldn't manipulate it. And then 3x1 would just flip the guy over, and we kept our structure. So yeah, I mean, there's some merit to it. I think that would be a really good way to get into Cincinnati stuff. Obviously they do it where they have a field side backer that doubles as an overhang that can play in space. So they have like 2 hulking inside line. And again, I don't think was planned. I think it was one of those deals where like, let's do this because we got these guys. I mean, one of the 27 from Cincinnati is a freaking grown man. Mm-hmm. He looks like Julius Peppers out there playing inside linebacker. It's wild. You got to go. If you haven't seen Cincinnati's defense, go watch them versus UCF. It is fantastic. And I think Tulsa's who they played in the championship game. I don't know. I'm sorry.
It was Tulsa. You were right.
Cincinnati friends are going to listen and be like, dude, what? You murdered this. But so, yeah, I think there's some merit to it. Okay. Like I said, versus 11, it scares me. I've done it. But I will only do it versus 11 if they are using... If they're using the tight end to run the bluff play and the quarterback's going to keep the ball, or zone, we call it peel and slice. I know most people call it the opposite, or they call it something else. So to me, peel is zone with the guy coming and kicking. Slice is zone with the guy bluffing the kick and then wrapping for the backer and the quarterback keeping it. The old Colin Kaepernick play. Mm-hmm. Then if it's zone, I'm more interested in doing that. But playing a 3-2 box versus gap schemes, not a winning business model for me personally, because I don't position my guys in a nod front. So you got to remember, if I'm playing this, I'm in a dime front.
Okay.
I'm not. Those 5 techniques are not. I don't want them taking double teams from Y's and stuff. I mean, the strong side guy, yeah, but the weak side guy, no chance. So that's my answer.
Most overlooked and we can do this also to shamelessly plug your CoachTube video, but the most overlooked thing when defending the wing tee?
Spilling down blocks from the wing.
All right. Perfect.
Wing is down blocking on a linebacker. You have to spill. If you don't, you're giving them the alley. Imagine the Vince Lombardi, we're going to create a seal here and a seal here and run the ball in the alley. They're creating a seal. You better knife in there and spill it. So... like, I worked with a guy defending the double wing, and it's all wing T-based plays for the most part.
Yeah.
And they were getting hurt because the wing was blocking down, they were getting a kick, and you were giving them that alley. Guy was sitting outside of it, and he changed that one thing, and he said it changed everything.
Okay. Your reaction when you hear...
Thank you. By the way, thank you, Pat Fox. He taught me that.
Your reaction to when DCs automatically say play man coverage versus RPOs.
Smart.
Okay. Do you think there's a obviously that's the go-to way. Is there any other simple answer besides just man coverage?
The simplest answer without playing man is Ripple's match, which turns into man. And I know Kyle Coker might yell at me for saying that, but it plays out like man.
Yeah.
In terms of not technique, not how you play it, but 4 verts turns into man free. It fits like it. Again, I know it's different. I know blah, 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 blah. You scooch in the slot versus playing catch or playing, get all that. But that's the easiest way to do it. And if you can't play man, then match 3. If you have to play too high, what we do, and this is I could talk a whole thing on this. If you're interested, I do have a CoachTube course on this. I need that like ding on my tooth, like the shitty infomercials. But so what we do is basically, I think Kyle calls it sling the fits. What we'll do is we'll play the front 5 kind of contain itself and then bring the 6th guy off the edge away from the back. Not blitz him, but he's in. So we'll put the 3 to the back, or the 3 away from the back. We'll loop the end around away from the back in the A gap. So it basically becomes tight front.
Yeah.
Just trust me, if we went into drawing this to be a whole thing. And then we play the C gap with the guy, the overhang away from the back. If you are seeing pistol or you're seeing teams that are throwing oppo, then you have to read it post snap.
Okay.
So basically now you want to set your 3 to the field. So at least if you have to scrape exchange in the boundary, there's less space. But that's how you have to do it then. And then you read it post snap. So quarterback, belly or back. So quarterback to me, opens to me, or even if he opens away. Like, so the opposite reads where this actually works, because usually when I talk about this stuff, it's audio only. So I'm like doing it in my living room, even though nobody can see me, but you can actually see me.
Yeah.
But if I'm opening up this way, but looking back this way, then that guy I'm looking at is out of the fit, which means the guy away sucks into the fit. And we just cut up I guess that's the cool way to say it now, cut up the front to guarantee that the B gap will be to that guy, not an A gap. Or we'll gum up the front and have it be a C gap if it's 10 personnel. If it's 11 personnel, it's easier to defend in terms of spacing. And then, I mean, that's how we would. I know that's a very, very short answer, and I mean, I hate to. I was joking earlier, but I do have a Coach 2 course where I go into like 3 hours about this. Like, it's hard to give an. Yeah, I have a bundle. It's defending RPOs out of every front structure, every coverage structure, and then developing third down coverage package, developing a third down pressure package. It's 7.5 hours of video. I think it's on sale for $50 bundled. You can get, I think I'm individually, I don't know how much it is, but if you want, I'll send the link, the bundle link.
All links
I'm not trying to be jerk salesman guy, but if it's if this is stuff you're like, wow, that's really great, you can DM me on Twitter and I'll explain it to you. But if you want to like see it and draw it out, and I hours of film and whatever, so I'll put that in there.
Click the links below.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, I understand you're a TCU guy at heart originally. What's your TCU or other? What's your favorite coverage?
What are they doing? Like, I don't have I have a favorite coverage for. I have a favorite coverage, like if we're playing the flex bone or if we're playing
2x2.
What are their routes?
I
don't think I don't.
Okay.
We have a starting point. Yeah. So we started with palms, but like I don't.
You don't have a personal favorite that you're just like, cause I mean, there are people in our profession that are like just die hard. Like, I love this. This is what I'm going to be in. Unless
I'm more of a split safety guy than a one high guy. If that's what you're looking. But favorite third down coverage 2x2, I can give you a better. But like I don't have a.
Okay.
Like if I'm seeing horizontal RPOs, I like the Michigan State stuff where you're playing press quarters and you're basically playing one-on-one on the outside. Like if I'm seeing a zone read, Lamar Jackson type guy, and all they're throwing is horizontal RPOs, then I love the Michigan State stuff. Get guys close to the box, make them throw the bubble out there. If I'm seeing down the field RPOs and Mac Jones is the quarterback and he's not going to run it, but they're going to lock out on it and throw it, I don't like the Michigan State stuff anymore. So like it depends. I mean, I'll say this: split safety usually over one high. But one of my favorite things on third down was to get in those 5-0 fronts, show 2 high, roll down, bring 5, play those games up front, and then have one of the safeties come down and take the running back. So I will say, let me say this. I think the best pure pass coverage in football, if I'm going to see a 2x2 team, I like Bama's Kruger or I'm trying to think about the way that what does Georgia call it? Nittany or whatever. It's man match cover 2.
Okay.
I don't like the buster stuff where the guy's like playing off and then he has to like head whip it and play the 15-yard out or whatever. I think for high school, you're not going to see that. But like TCU's 5-wall coverage, Bama's cut or Cougar, where you're playing, it ends up playing like 2-man, but you're able to switch routes to the same side.
Okay.
Where like if they run like scissors or something, you're taking away some of the weaknesses of 2-man. But again, if you're running crossers, if you're running 1 crosser, I'm okay with it. If you're running 2, that's the last coverage I want to be in. So if we're playing an air raid team, my favorite coverage is quarters to the back and halves away, because you're going to be able to play the 4-on-3 stuff to the back. You're going to be able to take away the man beaters away from the back. They can't influence your mic out of there with the swinging back and throw behind it. So I know I've given you a million different answers, but
you're good.
I have to have like information on things to be able to give a more accurate answer. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. Now,
I used to get really frustrated. So on the side, I used to get really frustrated when I was younger, when I would say that to guys.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, so what's your favorite coverage? And they would give me this, they'd look at me and laugh. I'm like, you fool. And ask me a million questions. And I was like, okay, yeah, but what is your favorite? Like, what do you like? But then as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh yeah, like, I get it now, because like, I hate zone dropping quarter, like true zone quarters might be my least favorite coverage. But if you're telling me I'm getting mesh, what does Bama do? 7-box patty, which is like zone match quarters. They say it's me, it's not. Let the crossers go, let it drop, let everything go, and then clamp on stuff. Kyle Kogan hates clamp or palms, hates it. But if you're getting post-wheel flare, that's his favorite coverage.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea of like, again, I'm not married to the system. I'm married to winning. So if I got to play some goofy shit to win, I'm going to play it.
I get you. Offensive play you hate defending the most?
Next. On this vein, I mean, there's a lot, but since I mentioned it, one play that's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
The teams that aren't like strong side rotating and dropping into the boundary, like dropping out to the boundary with your backers, is either 3x1 most jet motion or 2x1 with no motion. We'll do it out of 3x1. So 3x1, let's say trips left, fields to the left, offensive formation, X to the right, back to the boundary. Okay. Jet motion from any one of the 3. It doesn't matter. One of those guys, jet motion. They can either power read or jet lead or whatever. X on a post, lead back on a wheel, jet guy on a swing.
Okay.
It screws you up, because usually the force player gets drained out with the wheel, and then the backers come up to the run and that swing is open. And I know that there's, again, being a NorCal guy, knowing the jet offense or the fly offense under center, I know that that's like the big no-no is throwing to the fly guy. Like they just never do it, but that's deadly. Because it's almost like faking to the tailback and then throwing the screen to him, because it's like, once you play action somebody and you don't, you think if I'm going to fake it to the back and then end up throwing it to the same guy, that wouldn't be a problem. But like you teach your guys, oh my God, it's not run, pass, and then you turn and look away from him, and then you end up giving him the ball anyway. Screws up a lot of people.
Okay, and then my last question for you before we wrap this up. Why did you start an offensive podcast?
Well, before I answer that, let me go back. So, like, talking about that, like, it when you're doing those plays, let's talk about, I just want to talk about offense real quick. Good. Like, psychologically, football is a psychological game.
Yeah.
When you're calling plays, because one of the things that I do the most on defense is we stem and move all the time. And people would say, and this applies to offense too, and I'll get to that in a second. So like a lot of people say, well, if you're always going to line up and bear, if you line up and bear, you're going to stem out of it. Won't people just know that and then run the play that beats the even front and maybe bad versus bear, but know you're going to get out of it? I'm like, football coaches are risk averse. I don't care if you bail 1,000 times. If you show press, most people aren't going to want to throw hitches, right?
Yeah.
You're an offensive guy. Because if you throw a hitch in a press and he gets picked for 6, you're an asshole. And people are going to write about it in the papers.
Yes.
Now, my number one thing is I don't like being embarrassed in public, which is funny because I'm in public a lot on these type of things and I embarrass the shit out of myself, you know, so the psychology to an offensive coordinator, throw hitch in a press corner because you're going to bail. I'm not talking about Reed where like if he bails, you throw the hitch and if he presses his face. I'm talking about you're calling hitches with no conversions. Not many people will leave that call on, even though they're almost 100% sure that you're going to throw that hitch or you're going to bail. They still have a problem. It's risk aversion. It's like, I don't know. So on offense, it's like playing rock, paper, scissors. You've thrown rock 8 times in a row, right? Yeah. You've thrown rock. And even though I've thrown it 8 times in a row, you're going to be afraid to throw paper because that one time you throw paper, I switch to scissors and I got your ass.
Yeah.
That's what that's like, is a lot of the times where those plays work is, you know, you don't, I don't know. I don't, you know, that corner's there that, you know, you're running a play into a bad look because you think we're going to slant away. And I think that offenses can use that theory a lot on defenses is, you know, you put a guy in a position where, they're not going to throw to him. They're not going to throw to that guy. They're not going to throw to that guy. Or they're not going to fake to the back and then throw back to him. Like, they're not going to do that. You know, they're going to fake to the back, then roll out and throw. No, you fake to the back, you roll away from him, and then go psych and give it back to the guy you fake to. Like, nobody does that.
Yeah.
Well, because nobody does that, and because coaches are telling their kids nobody does that, do it. Anyway, I'm sorry. I know that was a long one, but I think there's a lot of psychology to that. Like, I don't know. I found very few coordinators that when we line up and bear will run really good even front plays that are terrible versus the bear because they're like, they're going to move out of it. Because I remember like Bud Foster talked about that back in, I think it was 2005 when he was switching the defense. He still lined up in the bear a shitload and moved out of it. And people were like, why are you doing that if you're not going to play it? He goes, I will play it every once in a blue moon because, again, most people, if they have trap on, guard trap, and you line up in the bear, they're not going to be like, they're moving even front. Don't worry about it. We're going to leave the trap on. No, because they don't move to the bear and you run trap in the bear, you're a jerk and you're going to get fired. You know what I mean? So it's that psychology of that. I will say this for offensive coaches and defensive coaches, use the risk-averse tendencies of coaches against them if you can. All right. Sorry. Back to your last question. I'm sorry for hijacking.
You're good. You're good. I think you might have sort of answered it a little bit there, but I mean, obviously you are the defensive, make defensive great again, but why add an offensive podcast to your already large workload?
Because I'm a glutton for punishment. No, I mean, part of it was that, but a lot of people were asking for it.
Okay.
Like, I have a lot of friends that listen to the defensive podcast, learn about defense. Like, we need an offensive one. We need an offensive one. We need an offensive one. And at first, the idea was to have an offensive guy like once a month. And I thought, well, that's really stupid because the show is called Make Defense Great Again.
Yeah.
See, here's the thing about the whole Coach Vass football, Make Defense Great Again. Like, the logo for the podcast is the logo for Coach Vass football because when we started, there was no Coach Vass football. It was just Make Defense Great Again. Then I needed a logo for the company when I started the company. And I'm like, well, why don't I use the logo that says CV on it? Like, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so I thought it was because people didn't understand. They're like, you built up this channel for 2 years. You got like all these Twitter followers, and now all of a sudden you're going to start from scratch. And part of it was I wanted for advertising opportunities to be kind of church and state, because I know that there's some guys that I've talked to, they're pushing offensive products, like certain products that would be for offense only. So I wanted to give them an avenue to, be able to kind of distinguish. I felt it was really dumb to have offensive shows on a podcast called Make Defense Great Again. And I wasn't going to change the name of the channel. I know that there's been a little bit of controversy about the name. Some people have not been excited about it. Some people have been really excited about it. It is satire. I'm not making any sort of political statement. But in just a mechanical, from like a logical standpoint, it doesn't make sense to have offensive content on a show called Make Defense Great Again. And I didn't want the podcast to be like some jerk who's got the chalk glass thing. Like, I wasn't trying to have on, what am I going to have Joe Moorhead on to tell me he's wrong? Like, are we crazy? And so I wanted to do something that was from an offensive perspective and do offense. And, it's growing. It's not where the defensive channel, it's kind of, if I'm being honest, I'm 4 episodes in. I've got 60-something episodes of defense with like some of the biggest names in football. Offense, I'm just starting, but it's disheartening. Like I did do these really good pieces of audio, and I get more listens. Like, I did a trailer for the podcast on my other channel, and that trailer has more listens than my top episode on the actual episodes. Yeah. That's going to take time. It
does.
But I wanted to do something, and I don't know if I'll do it forever. I've definitely bitten off more than I can chew, especially trying to launch this YouTube thing at the same time, and I feel like I'm going crazy. But I don't know if it'll last forever, but people ask for it. And again, it goes back to the learning thing. It goes back to wanting to learn. And it's one thing to have conversations about offense through the lens of defense. I didn't want to do that. Now, a lot of the anecdotes that I tell or stories I share or points of view that we faced that, and because I'm a defensive coach. I've coached offense before. In fact, I coached offense, was the first position I coached. Maybe that part of my eyes, but I got a street rep to maintain. But I coached quarterbacks and receivers first before I coached anything. And I felt like I needed to learn offense from an offensive standpoint. And then there was that, if we're being honest, that the marketing side of, people wanting to, guys were coming to me to publicize their book on, like, Bobby Peters is a friend of mine. He writes where he studies an offense. Bobby wanted to run a commercial on my defenses, or like JT O'Sullivan we did a thing together. Well, like one person bought his course. Well, yeah, because I have a bunch of defensive coaches. And so I felt like I was eliminating half, and this it kind of clashed with my whole, like, stay in your lane, know your limitations and things. And I'm not trying to say that I'm as knowledgeable on offense as defense. It will never happen, because I don't have the desire to learn offense like I do defense. But like, I felt like I could hold my own. I'm still very nervous. Like, I interviewed Kurt Warner, was like my 5th offensive interview. Yeah, not exactly easy. No, Kurt doesn't suffer fools well. But I feel like I knew enough that I could hold my conversation and just ask the questions. And knowing what questions to ask logically, that was the biggest thing, was, am I going to ask good questions? But besides the workload and the editing, like, I really enjoy that. I did a 3-hour and 15-minute Power Tees episode. It was one of my favorite things I've ever done. Because one of the goals from the offensive podcast was that I was going to focus on a contrarian offense once a month or every 3rd or 4th episode. Yeah. Where we focus on the power T, the double wing, because I saw a lot of those offenses, and I still think they have a place. I think the best thing the spread offense can do is put in a double wing.
I've coached double wing.
Why? Well, one, if you're platooned, it brings the team together, so treat it like a special team. And two, it gives you a toughness that being in the air raid doesn't give you. And I know people are going to slaughter me for this, but it's true. I've coached in air raid systems, and the toughest kids we ever had, when you get foot to foot, you know, it diminishes the whole fracture of the locker room if you have an O and a D. And we spent no more than 20 minutes a day on it. And as a defensive coordinator, I was happy to give that time up because, you know, if you get in the game and get into some trouble, like we did in our state championship game, it's 14-14, 4 out of our 5 starting offensive linemen out, including our center and our quarterbacks beat up. We ran the double wing and scored 24 unanswered points. We don't win that game if we don't have that in our offense. Plus all the toughness. I mean, when you get foot to foot and teeing off on a sled, and which I guess sleds aren't cool anymore. I found out online, like sleds are stupid, I guess now. I guess that's the new thing. I guess I'm an idiot for using sleds. But, you know, when you're getting foot to foot and just trying to knock somebody into next week, and you're not worried about comboing off, there is no combo. You combo when you block the linebacker with the body of the feet of the defensive lineman you're blocking. That's a toughness that you can't replicate by talking.
Correct.
And I think every spread offense should have some. The best piece of football advice I could give, like if you said what's one piece of advice that you would give out in football and anything, most people would be like, oh, some crazy defensive creeper. No, spread offensive coaches, find a contrarian offense that makes people's blood pressure boil, and go learn it. Go teach the basics enough for it. So have an off tackle play, have a wide play, have a counter, have an inside play, and have 2 play action passes. Something physical, something that stresses being foot to foot, and go knock the shit out of people. That's the best piece of advice I can give you. And so I like talking about that stuff. It's interesting to me. And so I wanted to do that. And now I have the platform where, you know, I can tweet out, hey, I'm starting this offensive show. And, you know, I do a lot of trial balloons. I'll tweet something out, and if it gets a response. I mean, I don't do polls like, should I do this, yes or no? Because I do on some polls if it's not like a value like that. Because I don't want, 90% people said, no, you shouldn't start an offensive podcast. Again, I don't like being embarrassed in public. But, you know, if it's one of these things where people were really responding well to it. Yeah. And I did like a naming competition and run Vass option. Yeah. Clear winner. But I enjoy it. I've enjoyed having these conversations and thinking differently, and it's a lot of fun. So
perfect, Coach. Perfect. I think that's a good way to end it. Coaches, don't forget to check out sponsors and affiliates below. If you want to go back and listen to any portion of this, the tags will be in the bio. If you're listening to the audio only version, just check out the YouTube channel. Make sure you check out Coach's stuff. His Twitter will be on there if you're like one of the 8 coaches in the country who haven't followed Coach here. Links to his CoachTube stuff, his podcasts will all be in the bio. Make sure you check those out. Make sure, again, if you got any questions, comment, hit up Coach, do whatever you need to do. But this was a special episode 50. Thanks again, coaches, and that was our episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.